It started with a letter, a plain white envelope with the HOA's logo stamped on the front, innocuous enough to blend in with the rest of my mail. I wasn't particularly concerned when I saw it. After all, my farm had existed peacefully alongside the Green Pines HOA for years. My family had owned this land for generations, and while I wasn't part of their organization, I kept a friendly but distant relationship with most of the residents. So you can imagine my surprise when I opened the letter and found a formal proposal to repurpose my farmland into a commercial shopping center. The letter began with polite platitudes about community growth and enhancing neighborhood value. But as I read further, the tone shifted to something more aggressive. The HOA board had taken it upon themselves to draft a plan for a new shopping complex that would greatly benefit the local economy. The only problem? The proposed site was my farm, a sprawling 50-acre property that had been in my family for nearly a century. The letter concluded with an invitation to an HOA meeting where they planned to discuss the proposal further, as if I was expected to simply roll over and agree to their demands. At first, I thought there must have been some kind of mistake. My farm wasn't part of the HOA's jurisdiction, and as far as I knew, they had no legal claim to my land. But as I read through the attached documents, it became clear this was no mistake. The HOA had commissioned a study claiming that my farm was underutilized and that its conversion into a shopping center would align with the community's long-term vision. They even included a rough sketch of proposed layout, complete with parking lots, retail stores, and a chain grocery store, all built on the land where my crops and livestock thrived. I was livid. My farm wasn't just a piece of land to me. It was my livelihood, my heritage, and my sanctuary. The idea of bulldozing it to make way for a strip mall was unthinkable. I decided to attend the HOA meeting, not to entertain their proposal, but to make it abundantly clear that my farm was not for sale. The meeting was held in the Green Pines Community Center, a modest building that was packed to capacity when I arrived. The room buzzed with anticipation as residents milled about, chatting and speculating about the agenda. At the front of the room stood Marcy, the HOA president, who greeted everyone with her usual saccharine smile. She was a fixture in the community, polished, poised, and utterly convinced of her own importance. As soon as she saw me, her smile widened. "Oh, wonderful! You're here!" she exclaimed, as if she hadn't just proposed tearing apart my life's work. "We're so excited to discuss the future of Green Pines with you." I didn't bother with pleasantries. "This proposal is ridiculous," I said bluntly. "My farm isn't for sale, and you have no right to plan anything on my land." Marcy's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. "We understand your concerns," she said, her tone patronizing. "But this isn't just about you. It's about what's best for the community. Your farm has so much potential, and we believe this shopping center will bring tremendous benefits to everyone." Her words were met with a smattering of applause from the audience, but I noticed several residents exchanging uneasy glances. It was clear that not everyone was on board with Marcy's grand vision. One elderly man near the back of the room stood up and cleared his throat. "I think the farm is fine the way it is," he said. "It's part of the charm of this area. We don't need more stores." His comment earned a few murmurs of agreement, but Marcy was quick to regain control of the narrative. "Change is always difficult," she said, her smile never wavering. "But progress requires sacrifice. This shopping center will bring jobs, convenience, and increase property values. It's a win-win for everyone." She turned to me, her expression softening, as if she were offering a compromise. "We're willing to compensate you generously for the land. You won't have to worry about a thing." I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Compensation? This isn't about money," I said. "This is about preserving my family's legacy. My farm isn't just a piece of property. It's a part of who I am, and no amount of money will change that." My words seemed to resonate with some of the residents, but Marcy wasn't giving up so easily. Over the next hour, she presented a polished slideshow detailing the economic benefits of the shopping center. She cited inflated statistics about projected revenue and claimed that local businesses were eagerly awaiting the opportunity to set up shop in Green Pines. It was all smoke and mirrors, designed to sway the crowd and pressure me into compliance. But I wasn't buying it. When it was finally my turn to speak, I didn't hold back. I explained the history of my farm, how it had been passed down through generations, and how I had worked tirelessly to maintain it. I pointed out the flaws in Marcy's proposal, from the environmental impact to the loss of open space that made our community unique. This isn't about progress, I said, my voice steady but firm. It's about greed. You're trying to take something that doesn't belong to you, and I won't stand for it. By the end of the meeting, the room was divided. Some residents sided with Marcy, drawn in by her promises of economic growth and convenience. Others stood with me, recognizing the importance of preserving the farm and questioning the HOA's overreach. As I left the meeting, I knew the fight was far from over. Marcy and the HOA weren't going to back down, and I would have to prepare for a battle unlike anything I had faced before. The pressure wasn't just coming from the HOA and their hired consultants. Marcy had ramped up her public relations campaign, flooding the neighborhood with flyers, social media posts, and even a promotional video touting the benefits of the proposed shopping center. The video featured glowing testimonials from local business owners, likely handpicked by Marcy, and exaggerated claims about job creation and increased property values. At one point, the video even included drone footage of my farm, accompanied by a voiceover describing it as a prime location for the future of Green Pines. The PR blitz was effective in swaying some of the more impressionable residents, but it also sparked backlash from others. Several neighbors reached out to me privately, expressing their support and offering to help in any way they could. One of them, a retired lawyer named Frank, became an invaluable ally. He helped me draft a letter to the HOA demanding that they cease all unauthorized activities related to my property and remove the sign immediately. He also suggested I contact the local media to expose what was happening. Taking Frank's advice, I reached out to a local news station, which quickly picked up the story. Within days, a reporter and camera crew arrived at my farm to interview me about the situation. I laid out all the facts: the unsolicited proposal, the trespassing consultants, the misleading promotional materials, and emphasized the importance of preserving my family's legacy. The story aired that evening, sparking a wave of public outrage. People from neighboring communities began flooding the HOA's social media pages with comments condemning their actions and calling for accountability. The pressure from the media seemed to rattle Marcy, but instead of backing down, she decided to dig in her heels. In an attempt to regain control of the narrative, she scheduled another HOA meeting, this time framing it as an opportunity to address community concerns. I knew I had to attend, not just to defend my position, but to expose the truth about the HOA's overreach once and for all. By the time the meeting rolled around, the tension in the room was palpable. The usual crowd of HOA loyalists was noticeably smaller, replaced by a larger group of residents who were clearly fed up with Marcy's antics. As she stood at the podium, attempting to justify the HOA's actions, I could see the cracks in her confidence. The fallout from the HOA meeting didn't stop Marcy. Instead, she became even more desperate, plotting a final, over-the-top gambit to force her vision of a shopping center onto my farm, no matter the cost. The first sign of her desperation came in the form of an unexpected visit from a county zoning official. One morning, as I was tending to my crops, a car pulled up at the edge of my property. A sharply dressed woman stepped out, clipboard in hand. She introduced herself as an inspector sent to investigate alleged zoning violations on my land. According to the complaint, filed anonymously, of course, my farm's operations were out of compliance with local regulations, including improper waste disposal and unauthorized building modifications. I knew instantly who was behind it. Marcy had clearly filed the complaint in a last-ditch effort to weaponize bureaucracy against me. I welcomed the inspector onto my property, confident that I had nothing to hide. After a thorough inspection, she found no violations and even complimented me on how well-maintained the farm was. But the visit left me rattled. It was one thing for Marcy to manipulate the HOA, but now she was dragging government officials into her vendetta. It didn't stop there. A few days later, I received a letter from a local development firm claiming they had been hired by the HOA to conduct a feasibility study for the shopping center. The letter included a thinly veiled ultimatum: either agree to sell the land or prepare for potential eminent domain proceedings. My lawyer, Frank, assured me that the HOA had no legal grounds to invoke eminent domain, especially since my property wasn't within their jurisdiction. Still, the threat was infuriating. Marcy was throwing everything she had at me, hoping to wear me down or scare me into submission. What Marcy didn't realize was that her aggressive tactics were only galvanizing more people against her. The local news station, which had already aired one story about the situation, picked up the new developments and ran a follow-up piece. This time, they included interviews with several neighbors who had grown fed up with Marcy's behavior. One resident described her as a tyrant who had taken the HOA too far, while another accused her of prioritizing her own ambitions over the well-being of the community. The public backlash reached a boiling point when a local environmental group got involved. They had seen the news coverage and reached out to me, offering their support. Together, we organized a petition to protect the farmland and prevent any commercial development on the site. Within days, the petition had thousands of signatures, including many from Green Pines residents who had once been neutral or even supportive of the shopping center. The tide was turning, and Marcy's grip on the neighborhood was slipping. Marcy's final desperate move came in the form of a surprise announcement. The HOA would be hosting a community event to celebrate the future of Green Pines and unveil their vision for progress. Flyers were distributed throughout the neighborhood, promising free food, live music, and a presentation on the shopping center project. It was clear this event was Marcy's attempt to rally support and regain control of the narrative. I knew I couldn't let her use the event as a platform to spread more misinformation. With the help of my neighbors, the environmental group, and Frank, we organized a counter-campaign. We printed our own flyers highlighting the importance of preserving the farm and exposing the truth about the HOA's overreach. We also prepared a presentation of our own, complete with testimonials from residents, expert opinions on the environmental impact of the proposed development, and a timeline of Marcy's unethical tactics. The day of the event arrived, and the atmosphere was tense. The HOA had gone all out, setting up tents, a stage, and even a bounce house for kids. Marcy, dressed in a bright blazer and wearing her signature smile, mingled with the crowd, clearly trying to project an air of confidence. But it didn't take long for things to unravel. As Marcy took the stage and began her presentation, the crowd grew restless. Her glossy slideshow and grand promises of economic growth were met with skepticism and pointed questions. "What about the environmental impact?" one resident shouted. "What gives you the right to decide what happens on someone else's land?" another demanded. Marcy's polished facade began to crack as she struggled to address the growing dissent. When it was my turn to speak, I took the stage with Frank by my side. Together, we laid out the truth. The farm was private property, the HOA had no jurisdiction over it, and the entire project was built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. I showed the security footage of the trespassing consultants, read excerpts from the threatening letters, and shared the findings of the environmental group, which highlighted the irreversible damage the shopping center would cause. By the time I finished, the crowd was cheering, not for Marcy's vision of progress, but for the preservation of the farm. Marcy's final attempt to regain control came in the form of an emotional outburst. "You're all being short-sighted," she yelled, her voice shaking. "This project is what's best for Green Pines. You're letting him ruin our future." But her words fell on deaf ears. The residents had seen through her lies, and her authority as HOA president was shattered. In the days that followed, the HOA board voted to abandon the shopping center project entirely. They also called a special election to replace Marcy as president, citing her unethical behavior and divisive leadership. When the results came in, Marcy was ousted in a landslide vote, and her replacement made it clear that the HOA would no longer pursue any actions against my farm. With the battle finally over, I could breathe a sigh of relief. The farm was safe, and Marcy's reign of terror had come to an end. Looking back, I realized that standing up to the HOA wasn't just about protecting my farm. It was about defending the values of integrity, respect, and community. And in the end, those values prevailed.